let's hear from, officially, the largest content creator on YouTube.
Your first video is not going to give views, period. It's not. Your first 10 are not going to give views. I can very confidently say that.
Basically, in the beginning, your videos are going to suck.
This is my 10th episode. Hooray, I made it this far.
What if I told you that Social Security might be the biggest financial disaster in America? A program that every American worker is forced to pay into, and yet somehow there are people as old as 300 still collecting benefits. We're talking about a program every American worker pays into, and yet no one really knows if the money's actually there.
Social Security is the biggest Ponzi scheme of all time.
And in just a couple years from now, experts believe Social Security will go broke.
Social Security's in trouble.
The program is quickly running out of cash.
Millennials and younger don't believe that they're going to see a penny of Social Security.
But did you also know there are more Social Security numbers in existence than there are actual living people? The government can't even track how many people are still getting checks that shouldn't be, and some of the fraud might be costing the taxpayers billions of dollars. In fact, recent discoveries show that the Social Security system still has people collecting benefits who are supposedly over several hundred years old, which is impossible because there's only a handful of people on Earth who live past 110. So either we've got the world's first vampires, or something really sketchy is going on. So if the government can't even keep track of who shouldn't be collecting Social Security, how do we trust them to manage the over $1 trillion a year that goes into the system? Somehow, some of these old Social Security numbers are still in use, and here's the real kicker. Social Security is projected to be fully insolvent within the next decade. That means unless something changes, benefits will automatically be cut by 20 to 25% across the board. So imagine retiring and suddenly losing a quarter of your income overnight. That raises the question, who's cashing these checks? How did it get this bad? And will Social Security be around much longer? I want to help explain Social Security's biggest scandals, why it's running out of money, whether it's secretly a Ponzi scheme, and most importantly, what's about to happen next. So with that said, let's get into it. Hi, my name is Andre Jick. Hope you're doing well. Come for the finance and stay for Social Security. Now, Social Security is something we've all heard of. We all pay into it with taxes, but most of us don't know how it actually works. In theory, it's supposed to be a system that makes sure that every American has financial security when they retire. But in reality, it's a system that was never designed to last this long. Before we talk about how bad things are today, we need to understand how we got here in the first place, because the origins of Social Security tell us a lot about why this system was doomed from the beginning. Back in 1935, the United States was deep in the Great Depression. The stock market had crashed, banks were failing, and unemployment was at a massive 25%. 1 out of every 4 Americans were out of work. Families lost their homes, savings were wiped out, and elderly poverty was skyrocketing. Back then, if you couldn't work, you were on your own. There was no government safety net. If your family didn't take care of you, you had no income, no health care, and no retirement plan. So a lot of elderly Americans were forced to beg on the streets or rely on charity just to get by. So the president at the time, Franklin Roosevelt, introduced the Social Security Act, a program designed to collect a small tax from workers and then pay out benefits to retirees when they turned a certain age. Now, this was a revolutionary idea at the time. Before Social Security, retirement plans were really rare. Only 5% of workers had pensions. Most people worked until they physically couldn't anymore, and then they relied on their children or charity to survive. When Social Security was created, the goal was to pay just enough to keep seniors out of poverty. But here's where things get really interesting. When Social Security was first created, the average life expectancy in America was just 63 years old, and the retirement age was set to 65. That means most people weren't even expected to live long enough to start collecting benefits. In fact, when Social Security started, only 54% of men and 60% of women even made it to age 65. This means almost half of all workers paid into a system without ever seeing a single check. And this was by design. The system worked because the government knew that most workers wouldn't live long enough to collect. And if they did, they wouldn't collect for long. Because in 1940, if you did make it to 65, the average person only lived another 12 years. Compare that to today, where if you made it to 65, you're expected to live another 20 years or more. That means Social Security is paying benefits for twice as long as what was originally designed. And in 1940, everything changed. One person beat the Social Security system. The first person to ever collect a Social Security check was Ida Mae Fuller. She was a legal secretary from Vermont, and just like millions of Americans, she started paying into Social Security when it first launched in 1937. But here's the crazy part. She only worked for 3 years before retiring in 1940. And in those 3 years, she contributed a grand total of just $22.54 in payroll taxes. Her first ever Social Security check was a whopping $22.54, the exact amount she had paid in. And that was just the beginning. Ida lived to be 100 years old and collected Social Security for 35 years. And over the lifetime of her retirement, she collected a grand total of $22,888 in benefits. That's a return of 1,000 times what she put into the system. She was the first, but she wasn't the only one. In fact, almost everyone in that first generation of retirees made out like bandits. So the question is, what happens when the math stops working? What happens when there's not enough retirees collecting out? That's exactly what started happening. When Social Security started in 1935, it worked because there were more workers paying into the system than retirees collecting out. In 1935, there were 42 workers for every one retired person. But by 1960, that number dropped to just 5 workers per retiree. And that's not the only thing that contributed to the downfall of Social Security. Social Security operated strictly within its own finances, and that extra money should have been saved and invested for future retirees, but instead, the government just spent our money. Congress used it to pay for other government programs, replacing the money with IOUs, called the Social Security Trust Fund. So how did we let that happen? In 1968, the government did something that would change Social Security forever, and not in a good way. President Lyndon B. Johnson made a decision that would allow Social Security's extra money to be spent on whatever Congress wanted. It was called the Unified Budget. All of a sudden, Social Security's money was being counted as government revenue. And just like that, it became super easy for politicians to raid the piggy bank. This made it so that, on paper, Social Security's surpluses were now counted as government income or revenue. Why he did that was to make federal deficits, aka government overspending, look smaller than it actually was. At the time, the US was spending a lot of money on the Vietnam War and programs like Medicare and Medicaid. And by rolling Social Security's extra funds into the general budget, Johnson's administration was able to hide the true cost of government spending. For example, in 1969, the reported federal deficit was only $3.2 billion, but without Social Security's surplus being counted as revenue, the real deficit would have been closer to $25 billion. Now, at first, this seemed harmless because Social Security was still running at a surplus. It was making more than it was paying out. But it was that decision that set the stage for decades of mismanagement, waste, and fraud. It made it easier for future politicians to tap into Social Security's excess money for other government programs. Congress borrowed our money to cover deficits and fund programs like military expansion, infrastructure projects, and welfare programs. By 1999, Social Security surpluses were making up over 30% of the balanced budget under Bill Clinton. But in reality, it was just masking the real federal deficit. Then fast forward to after 9/11. President George W. Bush passed major tax cuts, reducing government revenue by over $1.35 trillion over 10 years. So to help offset the newly spent money, the federal government borrowed even more from the Social Security Trust Fund, using that money to finance both the tax cuts and increase military spending in Iraq and Afghanistan. By the time Bush left office in 2008, $1.7 trillion of Social Security surplus funds had been spent. And then the 2008 financial crisis happened. Bank bailouts and TARP put even more pressure on Social Security. But the bailouts themselves were not pulled from Social Security. It's just that bailing them out meant that the government had to borrow even more money, lowering its ability to pay back what it already owed to Social Security. And in 2020, the government spent even more. Trillions on stimulus programs like the CARES Act and expanded unemployment benefits to prevent the economy from collapsing. The federal government took on huge deficits, which put even more strain on its ability to pay back Social Security's IOUs. And that brings us to today. In early 2025, the DOGE subcommittee held its first hearing and uncovered billions lost to fraud and improper payments. The Social Security Inspector General reported that from 2015 to 2022, about $71.8 billion was improperly paid out. That's almost $1 billion a month in mistaken or fraudulent payments. The Social Security Administration even admitted most of those were overpayments to people who were eligible, meaning the government just messed up and paid too much. And recently, Elon claimed he found crazy things in Social Security, like people over 150 years old still on the payroll.
Cursory examination of Social Security, and we've got people in there that are 150 years old.
Now, some people say, no, this is just Elon Musk who misread the data because Social Security keeps a database of every number ever issued, including people born in the 1800s who obviously passed away a long time ago, but lacked that status in the system. Those records exist, but that doesn't mean they're getting paid. And that might be true, but that doesn't explain all the fraud that is still there. The DOGE Task Force, for example, claims that there are more Social Security numbers in existence than there are living workers. How is that even possible? The Social Security Administration has issued over 450 million Social Security numbers since the program started. But here's the problem. There's only about 165 million active workers in the US today. So where did the rest of those numbers come from? Now, some of that are due to old numbers that belong to deceased people, but that doesn't explain all of them. There have even been cases where Social Security numbers were being used by multiple people at the same time, either through fraud or simple government error. And this has led to theories that millions of phantom people are still on the books and receiving benefits, costing taxpayers billions of dollars. Now, some of the press denies these allegations and says, no, this is just data that Elon misunderstood. They're blowing it up to be worse than actual reality. But the Social Security Administration itself admitted that over 6 million Social Security numbers are still active for people over 112 years old, which would be impossible because there's only a handful of people alive on Earth who are that old. Some of those numbers might be errors in the system, but a lot of those numbers are being actively used in fraudulent claims. That means deceased people right now might actually be collecting Social Security, either through identity theft, government incompetence, or maybe something worse. A 2015 audit found that thousands of people were receiving benefits under multiple numbers at the same time. In one case, someone managed to get 2 full sets of Social Security benefits by using a second number. Another report found that the Social Security Administration had issued the same number to multiple people, creating massive identity conflicts. So the question is, if the government can't track who's alive and who should be collecting our tax dollars, how do we trust that Social Security is being properly managed? And this is exactly why people demand more transparency from the government, and yet, despite the repeated calls for audits and investigations, we're still left with more questions than answers. Now, one of the biggest lessons I've personally learned is that I'm not going to wait for the government. Did you know, for example, that 25% of all retirement assets are lost or forgotten? That's billions of dollars just sitting there unclaimed.
Sounds about right.
And if you've ever switched jobs, there's a good chance you have an old 401k floating around somewhere. The problem is, most people don't know how to roll it over or even where to start. It can be complicated, time-consuming, and kind of annoying. That's where Capitalize comes in. Get back to it. The billion-dollar question is, what can the government do? There's really only 3 choices, and none of them are really that good. First, they could raise payroll taxes, and that means you and I pay more out of our paychecks. No one likes that. Second, they could cut benefits. That means retirees get less money every month, even if they paid in for decades. That doesn't sound good either. Third, they could raise the retirement age again, meaning we'd all have to work longer before we're allowed to collect. See the problem? No one wants to take responsibility for fixing this. So the short answer to what they're doing about this is not enough. And the solutions that have been proposed so far are kind of lame. Some say we should tax the rich more to make up the shortfall because right now, incomes above $160,000 a year aren't taxed for Social Security. Some proposals suggest lifting that cap so higher earners pay more. Other people want to raise the retirement age to 68 or 69, and since people are living longer. Another idea is means testing benefits, meaning wealthy retirees would get less or no Social Security to preserve it for those who actually need it. And some politicians have floated privatization, allowing workers to invest part of their Social Security taxes into the stock market for potentially higher returns. And out of all the proposals, this one is the best. Our retirement dollars are already being gambled by the government, so it might as well be taxpayers who get the benefit of gambling our own money in the stock market. That way we have a chance. But critics argue that's really risky, especially if there's a market crash right before someone retires. So no matter what, change is going to have to happen, whether people like it or not, because if nothing's done, Social Security will automatically cut benefits across the board by about 20 to 25% in 2033. So if your grandma gets paid $2,000 a month now, she'd be looking at $1,500 to $1,600 a month instead. That's a massive cut, and for millions of seniors, it could mean the difference between making ends meet and struggling. That's the reality. Now, Social Security isn't some secret Ponzi scheme. It kind of was in the beginning because the earliest people got to profit the most out of it, but it is a system created by the old world that doesn't work for the new one. The fact that there are millions of extra Social Security numbers floating around that phantom people might still be getting benefits from means that the government is incompetent at best or is using our money to fund fraud and waste at worst. So the real question is, if there's nothing to hide, then why not conduct a full public audit of Social Security? Why not verify exactly where the money's going and fix the errors that cost taxpayers billions? Until we get real answers, we'll never know. But what do you think? Do you think Social Security will survive, or are we watching the end of it in slow motion? And if you were in charge, what would you do? Would you raise payroll taxes, cut benefits, or raise the retirement age? Or do you think there's a better way? Oh, and one last question. Should we audit Social Security the same way we should audit Fort Knox? I think we should. Let me know what you think in the comments. I read all of them. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Smash the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. I'd love to see you back here next week. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
The Federal Reserve Bank just put out a concerning statement about our economy.
Here we go, right into
The
it.
Atlanta Fed just said that the United States economy is not expected to grow in the first quarter of 2025. It's not expected to stay the same. They are expecting our economy to shrink in the first quarter of 2025. This would be the first quarterly contraction for the United States economy since the first quarter of 2022. Now, if you remember what happened in 2022, we saw 2 quarters of economic shrinking. That is the technical definition of a recession, but we weren't declared to be a recession in 2022. And we also saw the stock market fall by around 20% in 2022. That's why in this video, I want to go over what's going on with the economy and what the Federal Reserve Bank said. That way you don't get misled by the headlines. And if you want to read the statement by the Federal Reserve Bank, I have that for you down in the description as well. Now, the first thing that I want to make sure is extremely clear is we have very little information. The Federal Reserve Bank put out essentially 2 sentences saying that we believe that the economy is going to shrink in the first quarter of 2025, and then they link to their chart showing that they believe that the economy is going to be shrinking in 2025. They didn't give any hard reasons, but we have a lot of people giving opinions. You have a lot of people giving their thoughts here. But I want to look at the hard facts, and then I want to talk about the opinions. Starting with the hard facts. One reason why people are talking about the economy shrinking is because imports have soared in the first quarter of 2025. This is what MarketWatch said. Imports have soared as businesses moved to get ahead of higher costs from proposed tariffs from the Trump administration. This increase in imports subtracts from GDP growth. What that means is we have a lot of businesses saying, we might see tariffs on Canada, Mexico, China. So let's get our stuff now before the tariffs happen. Let's buy a lot of stuff now before these tariffs happen. That way we don't have to worry about paying those tariffs in April, May, or June or beyond. And so it looks like a lot of businesses were importing stuff into the United States in the first quarter of 2025 as a proactive measure being worried about tariffs. Well, those imports are a negative measure on our GDP because it shows that we are importing more stuff. So that could be one reason why our economy is shrinking. Not because we're in a recession per se, but because people are buying more stuff from foreign countries. That's what MarketWatch is saying. The second part to this is people being worried because there's a lot of changes happening in our economy. We have changes with tariffs. We have changes with Doge. We have changes with artificial intelligence. We have changes with reciprocal tariffs. We have changes with cryptocurrency, and we would have changes with BRICS. I've made videos about pretty much every single one of these topics, but all of these concerns have people worried about the economy and, of course, the stock market, because we have been seeing a ton of volatility in the stock market, and we've been seeing a ton of volatility in cryptocurrency. And this is where I want to remind you for 1 second that while a lot of this volatility creates panic and fear, it also creates opportunity. And this is why on March 11th, I'm hosting my free workshop where I'm going over all the changes that we're seeing happen in our economy right now, from tariffs to Doge to AI, and how these things create an investment opportunity for you. It's a free workshop. I'm doing 2 sessions on March 11th, once in the morning at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and again in the evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's completely free, so if you'd like to join, I have the link for you down in the description. Hello, just make sure you join soon if you're interested, because we have a limited number of people that can actually join live, and we have many thousands of people that have already registered. So talking about the concerns, there's been a lot of changes happening. Obviously, there's been a lot of news lately about tariffs that has been hurting the stock market because companies are concerned that these tariffs will hurt trade, it will hurt business. And then there's the uncertainty aspect, which is, okay, if we do implement these tariffs, what will countries do to us? Because there's been a lot of talk of reciprocal tariffs by Canada, maybe by Mexico, maybe by other countries like China. What is the impact of that going to be if we are selling our products there? And then there's also the talk of tariffs on European countries. How is that going to impact our economy? Not to mention that these tariffs could also have an impact on inflation. So there's a lot of uncertainty, and the stock market hates uncertainty. In addition to that, we have a lot of changes happening in our government, from cultural shifts to actual department changes. Doge has been laying people off, they've been cutting departments, and they've been making a lot of changes. Now, the thing that I want you to remember here is every dollar spent is a dollar of income for somebody else. And I made a video about a week ago talking about this. The largest spender in our economy is not Amazon or Jeff Bezos or Apple. It's the United States government. And the government has been spending money through our tax dollars and debt. Well, that's good on one hand because it's been stimulating the economy. Every time the government spends money, somebody's getting paid. If they're paying for construction workers, if they're paying for military, if they're paying for whatever, somebody's getting paid. And that somebody then has money to buy a house, to buy a car, to do other things in the economy. Well, the downfall is the government has been spending a lot of money that they don't have because the government has been going deeper and deeper into debt. We have $36 trillion of national debt, actually more than that. And we spent about $2 trillion more than what we generated in taxes in 2024. So we're spending a lot of money that we don't have. This is called deficit spending. And this is good in the economy because it boosts the economy, but it creates a problem, and that problem is inflation. And this is why I always say the most expensive kind of money is free money. Because the person who pays the price is the person that does not understand how inflation works. The person that pays the price is the person that doesn't understand how to invest their money. The person that pays the price is the person that is not financially educated. And unfortunately, that's the majority of people. So here we have the situation where we're seeing a lot of changes happen in the government. We're seeing a lot of changes happen in the private sector. And all these changes are creating uncertainty. And like I said a few minutes ago, the stock market hates uncertainty because people, investors, are dumping their money into the stock market with the goal of growing their money. Well, when you are uncertain as to what's going to happen to the economy with tariffs, when you're uncertain about inflation, when you're uncertain about how the economy is going to move, well, you might not want to put your money in the stock market because you'll say, I want something a little bit safer. I want something that's a little bit more secure because I don't know if people are going to be able to afford Amazon in a few months. I don't know if people are going to be able to afford the groceries as easily in a few months. And so we've been seeing people now look for safer alternatives. You might have seen gold prices, they've been booming. And this has been creating a lot of uncertainty. Now, the stock market and the economy are two different things, but they are similar. And just because you see a stock market downturn doesn't necessarily mean you're going to see a recession, but they do often go hand in hand. When you see the economy go down, you generally see the stock market go down. Now, we do see periods where they move in opposite directions. I mean, in 2020, we were in a recession, supposedly the worst recession since the Great Depression, yet the stock market was breaking a new record high by the end of 2020. So yes, the stock market and the economy don't always have to move in the same direction, but in general, over the long term, you do see them move a little bit more linearly. But all these concerns have created a little bit more fear, and you're starting to see that in the markets as well. But you're also seeing it in cryptocurrency. Now, cryptocurrency is interesting because, of course, Bitcoin was booming in the early parts of 2025 because everybody was excited on this idea that Trump is going to make the United States the crypto capital of the world. And over the last few weeks, we saw crypto prices fall. Now, a lot of people panicked about crypto prices going from $100,000 a coin to below $80,000 a coin. But I want to remind you that 6 months ago, Bitcoin was at $60,000 a coin. And cryptocurrency is extremely, extremely speculative. And that's what you have to remember if you're investing in speculative assets, that they move up and down very fast. It can crash just as fast as it booms. And so over the weekend, Trump put out a message saying that now he wants to create a strategic cryptocurrency reserve. And he named off a few cryptocurrencies like XRP and Solana. And after that, we saw crypto prices boom again. And that gave people a lot of relief. And then crypto prices started to fall back down to earth again. So you can start to see that there is some concerning sentiment out there. But sentiment can change like that. People can get excited tomorrow. People can get freaked out the next day. That's the downfall of liquid assets. Liquid assets like stocks and cryptocurrency, things that you can sell very easily. If you are going to be an investor, you have to remember to stay calm, because the reality is people love to sell emotion. And there's a lot of changes happening in the economy. And if your goal is to be an investor, you don't need to worry about what's happening in the day-to-day. You need to worry about the long term. People freak out all the time. People freak out and then they show it in the stock market. Well, your goal is not to freak out. It is to find the opportunity. And when people are selling, well, that can create a good buying opportunity. But the goal is to be a long-term investor. And it's very difficult when everybody's selling. It's very difficult when you go through long periods in the red. And we haven't seen a long period of downturn in a very long time. I mean, 2022 was a little bit of a downturn. I mean, we saw the year of the stock market being down, but it wasn't horrible. We saw such a huge run up in 2020 and 2021 that it didn't feel like that bad. 2020 wasn't really a downturn because the markets went down, and then we saw the fastest rally in the stock market in the history of time. So the last time we really saw a true painful downturn was after the 2008 recession. So it's been a while. Now, I'm not saying we're going to see a downturn tomorrow, but you got to remember, recessions are a part of our economy. You got to be prepared for them. And a lot of people are freaking out when we see these small moves in the market, but that's a part of the market. And I want you to be educated and aware that we don't freak out, because one of the most basic concepts of investing in the market is to stay calm. And if you can stay calm, well, then you're not going to be enticed to buy something that you shouldn't. And you're not going to be enticed to sell something you shouldn't. See, it's the greed and fear. Those are the two emotions that not only drive markets, but they also are what drive media. Media loves selling you greed, they love selling you fear. They want to tell you that you're going to get rich if you buy this thing, or if you don't do this, you're going to lose all your money, because that's what drives clicks. I'm telling you this because I have a media company. I've seen it. And that's one of the reasons why I push Market Brief so hard, because all of our content is inside of one email, it's inside of one newsletter, so we don't have to have the same sensationalism, but this is where you got to understand the game. You got to understand how investing works. The best investors are the ones that don't get caught up in the emotion. They understand what's happening, and then they find the opportunity. That's what Wall Street is looking to do. And yes, we have some concerns about the economy shrinking, but we don't know exactly what's going to happen yet. Of course, you want to be prepared for recession, but we don't know when the next recession is going to happen. You want to be prepared so when it happens, not if, but when it happens, you can capitalize on that opportunity. Again, I'll be keeping you posted here on my channel. We'll be keeping you posted on Market Briefs. And on a workshop on March 11th, I'll be talking about how you can capitalize on the investment opportunities that we're seeing happen around us right now. And with that, I will see you on YouTube tomorrow.
Well, that is a ton to take in right there. Did you get all that? What are your thoughts on Social Security and everything? I mean, I've been self-employed most of my life, being in entertainment industry. Social Security was never something that I imagined was on my horizon. Let's check in with Forbes now for the 10 richest people in the world.
Today on Forbes, the top 10 richest people in the world, March 2025. While the Trump administration spent much of February working to slash federal employment, stocks sagged, and the world's 10 richest people collectively got $140 billion poorer. Altogether, the top 10 richest are worth a notable $1.89 trillion, down from $2.03 trillion at the start of February. Our top 10 richest people on Earth list is as of March 1st, 2025 at 12 a.m. Eastern Time. As a reminder, stock prices fluctuate routinely, so the net worths on our list may change on a daily basis. Forbes tracks the daily changes on our real-time list of billionaires. Forbes has been keeping track of the world's billionaires since 1987. In April 2024, we found 2,781 of them for our annual list. Of the top 10 richest people in the world over the past month, Elon Musk was the biggest loser of the bunch. Though he still holds on to his spot as the world's wealthiest person, a sharp downturn in Tesla shares shaved $62 billion off his fortune, as the electric vehicle maker shed a remarkable 1/4 of its market valuation in February. Back in December, Musk became the first billionaire to be worth more than $400 billion, as Tesla shares climbed and the value of Musk's privately held artificial intelligence firm, xAI, surged thanks to new investors. But his tenure at that upper echelon was relatively short-lived. On February 10th, as Tesla shares tumbled, his fortune dropped below $400 billion, and the stock kept falling. As of March 1st, he's worth $359.5 billion, Forbes estimates. The plunge in Tesla shares took place amid reports that purchases of Tesla vehicles have declined dramatically in Europe and states like California. In the US, some citizens unhappy with Musk's abrupt moves to fire federal workers in his role as a leader of DOGE, or the Department of Government Efficiency, have vandalized Tesla dealerships or staged protests in front of them. Mark Zuckerberg had a better month in net worth terms, becoming the world's second richest person, a first for him. Zuckerberg has weaker Amazon shares to thank for his move into the number 2 spot. A nearly 11% drop in Amazon's stock price in February erased more than $23 billion from Amazon chairman Jeff Bezos' fortune, dragging him down to the number 3 rank and making way for Zuckerberg to move ahead of him. Zuckerberg's fortune also fell last month, but not as much as Bezos's. The Meta platform CEO starts off March worth an estimated $230.7 billion. Bezos is not far behind, worth an estimated $226.7 billion. At number 4 is Larry Ellison, the co-founder of software firm Oracle, with a net worth of $204.6 billion. Ellison kept his number 4 rank from the prior month, despite an $8.8 billion dip in his fortune. Oracle shares fell about 2% in the past month. At number 5 is Bernard Arnault, CEO and chairman of luxury goods group LVMH, who got $2.8 billion poorer amid a slight decline in the group's share price. The Frenchman's net worth as of March 1st was $186.4 billion. At number 6 is Warren Buffett, who is the only one of the world's top 10 richest whose fortune grew last month. Shares of Berkshire Hathaway, the investing conglomerate he leads, ticked up about 10%, adding nearly $15 billion to Buffett's fortune, which now clocks in at $161.1 billion. At number 7 and 8 are Google co-founders Larry Page and Sergey Brin, respectively. Page's fortune fell by $26 billion in the past month, as Google parent Alphabet's shares tumbled more than 13% during the month. Page's net worth is $141.5 billion. Brin's fortune fell $24.4 billion in the past month to $135.4 billion. At number 9 is Amancio Ortega, the founder of Zara parent Inditex, whose net worth is $121.9 billion. The Spaniard keeps his number 9 rank for the second month in a row. His fortune declined $1.4 billion in the past month. And at number 10 is Steve Ballmer, the former CEO of Microsoft and the owner of the LA Clippers. The drop in Microsoft shares led to a $4 billion decline in Ballmer's fortune, which now is estimated to be $118.9 billion. For full coverage, check out the Forbes Wealth Team's piece on Forbes.com. This is Kieran Meadows from Forbes. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you. Which one do you vote for? So real quick, just want to thank you if anybody who's watching. This is my 10th episode. Hooray, I made it this far. So thank you for being here, and this is part of my learning journey. Learning about personal finance, learning about YouTube editing, and dedication to this one video a week discipline challenge I put myself in. So I'm on my way. Cheers.